How are you doing? That's the question that popped in my head when I was trying to decide what I should do a video on this week. I'm trying to prep. I know my recording time is going to be coming up pretty soon. And I was thinking to myself, I need a video to hopefully provide value, hopefully to bless people, hopefully to give them some insight into living the more intentional life. What can I do? And this question just popped into my head. How are you doing? And originally I thought, you know what? That could make a nice, sweet little video. But then I began to dig in it further, and I realized that what I thought was a fairly simple, benign question that could have like a sweet little video behind it was actually uh, much deeper and more important than I thought. So let's talk about it. So when this question of how are you doing first popped into my head, I thought, you know what, that could make a nice little video. Sometimes because it becomes so common that people just say, how are you doing in passing, or you come in the morning to work and you're like, hey, how are you doing? And nobody actually intends for you to respond. It's just a greeting. And I thought, you know what, maybe it'd be important that just to remind ourselves all together that sometimes you need to hear from other people, how are you doing? And they really mean it. They really care about how you're doing. And then I was going to say, sometimes it's important that you be the person to reach out to somebody and really ask them, how are you doing? And if you asked them, and because so many people are just so used to just saying, I'm fine. No, really, how are you doing? And then lastly, I was thinking to myself, and then we could talk about how sometimes it's important that we reflect in our own lives and check in on ourselves and ask ourselves, hey, how are we doing? Where are we at? And I thought it would just make a nice little video. And um, but I figured, you know what, I should still do my research, still dig into it. And one of the things that I do is I use Chat GTP to really like a super Google to just do research and stuff. I don't let AI write my own scripts. I don't do that, but I will use it to say, hey, what about this? And I have a question over here. Now I use it for research. And I really was thinking that I could kind of skip that part because this is going to be a simple video. But I was like, you know what? Let's see what we can see. This is just the main way my mind works. I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else. I don't know if it uh, anybody else thinks this way. But then I asked ChatGTP, why do we ask, "How are you doing?" What is the origin of that? What's the etymology of that? And it took me down this rabbit hole. Uh, it ChatGTP said, the reason that we say how are you or how are you doing is it comes from an an older English where they used to ask, how do you do? If you watch some older movies, a gentleman might come up and be like, how do you do? And they're not asking to elicit an actual response. It was a form of greeting. And back in the day, if someone came up to you and said, how do you do? The correct response was, how do you do? You returned it. It was the equivalent of saying hello, or it was a greeting. And so I began to dig into, well, how did this question become just this greeting that nobody actually needs a response to? And we dug further down, and the research showed that how do you do actually came out of and kind of evolved from an even earlier English phrase of how do you fare. They switched up how do you fare to how do you do. But in the older English, when someone said how do you fare, they actually were asking how's it going. And so I dug a little bit deeper, and I was like, well, what's the origin of this word fare? What why do you ask, how do you fare? Or even older English, they would ask, how fare ye? Right? And that turned into how do you fare? That turned into how do you do? That turned into how are you doing? That turned into how are you? That's the whole structure of the evolution of that thing. But the question, how fare ye, or how do you fare? That word fare comes from an old Germanic word, if you go all the way back down, and it meant a travel or a journey. And so when someone said, "How do you fare?" they were saying, "How's your journey? How's your travel going?" And they were actually asking, "How was the travel?" And so when you get right down to it, I just had this idea, just going down this rabbit hole of the origin of how do you do. I got to the place where really what you could ask is, how well are you navigating life? That's really, if you go all the way back down to it, that's what you're asking yourself. And I thought to myself, how are you doing? It seems fairly benign. I mean, like I said, in modern times, we don't really even usually expect an answer. And it is important sometimes to ask your loved ones, no, really, how are you doing? You need to you need to let them know, I really am asking because I care. I really do want a response. But that's still, how are you doing is kind of a benign response. But to ask somebody, how well are you navigating life, is something much more deeper and much more profound. And now I'm not saying if you're passing your coworker in the hall and they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" you should go into this deep philosophical thing. But it got me thinking about, in personal development, we talk about self-awareness, we talk about reflection, we talk about, you know, uh, really being able to look at your life. And what I realized was that's a pretty good question to do that self-reflection on. How well am I navigating life? I think that's an important question. I think it would do well if I made it a practice, maybe once a month or once a quarter, to actually take stock of my life and the direction I'm going. How well am I navigating life here? Because navigating has to do with the travel. Life is a journey, and we know there's going to be twists and turns and up and down, or there's going to be storms, and there's going to be stops, and there's going to be breakdowns, and all these things. But you're navigating your way through life, and but this idea of navigating through life also brings with it the idea of you're the one navigating. We did a video a number of months back, maybe even over a year ago, talking about you're the captain of your own ship. You're the one in control. And I just begin to think about this question. I begin to ask myself this question. I have so many desires. I have so many things in my heart that I want to do. Um, I want to build multiple streams of income, but at the same time, I want to do the will of God, that the thing that He's called me to do. And I need to make sure that those things are not conflicting, and I'm not just doing things I want to do. I got so much stuff, and I begin to think to myself, I need to ask myself more often, how well am I navigating these things? How well am I navigating through life right now? And then the big question is, if you can ask yourself that question and you can truthfully say, you know what, we've had some ups and downs and we've had some storms, but overall, hey, we're doing pretty good. Well, then you have something to be extremely thankful for. And if you'll keep that question in mind and you can answer the question, I'm navigating this well, it will help you through all those twists and turns and storms, because you're looking at something beyond just the immediate moment. I'm in a storm, but no, I'm navigating myself well. You think about it in terms of uh, a ship journeying through the ocean. I'm still making progress to my goals. I may have gotten a little off course, but I corrected. I may have went through a storm, but and I didn't make any progress during that time. But the storms passed. We made it through, and we're moving on. We're making progress in this journey. I'm doing well. You have something extremely thankful to something to be extremely thankful for. But if you ask yourself the question, how well am I navigating this journey? And the true answer is not good. Well, then the second question you have to ask yourself is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to become a better navigator on this journey through life? We talked just very recently on 5 deadly mindsets, and two of them specifically, we talked about a victim mindset and an entitlement mindset. So often, if our journey and through life is not going well, we're looking to other people. Well, if they would do something different, I could navigate this thing called life better. Or if this person would just do it for me, they should be the one navigating my life. That's not how life works. And so if you ask yourself the question, how well am I navigating through this life? Another way to ask that is, am I satisfied with the progress and the direction I'm going? How am I faring in life? If the answer is I'm not all that happy with it, the question you have to ask yourself is, what are you going to do about it? And so often when people begin a personal development journey, it's because they got to the place where they didn't maybe ask themselves the question, but it became painfully obvious to them that their navigation through this journey of life was not going well, and so they needed to do something different. But you can ask yourself that question. You don't have to wait until your life completely falls apart to say, oh, I need to make a change. No, you could ask yourself today, how well am I navigating through life? And if the answer is like, I probably could do better, well, then what are you going to do better? How are you going to become a better navigator? It could be, I need to learn more. I need to start feeding myself good knowledge, whether it's personal development stuff, whether it's philosophy stuff, whether it's just how to be a good parent, whatever it is. You could learn more to become a better navigator. You could say, you know what, to navigate this better, I need to develop better habits. My habits are what keeps getting me off course in this navigation through life. So I'm gonna start building better habits. Some people, myself included, if you're a believer, or if you believe in God and you believe, if you made Jesus the Lord of your life, for me, if I realize I'm not navigating this too well, it's because I have neglected my co-navigator, the Holy Spirit, and I can begin to rely more on God to help me navigate this through. And really, that's the best way to navigate life, is when God Himself is with you in the ship, and you still got your hands on the wheels. He's not going to take over, but you can be constantly looking left, okay, oh, right, okay, yeah. He'll help you navigate through life better. But what are you going to do if this life that you're living, you're not navigating it well? What are you going to do to change? Because here's the thing. If you don't change, nothing changes. If you don't do something different, your life stays the same. And if your current navigation through life is not good, you don't want to stay not good. If you don't make the change, if you don't make the course correction, if you don't do the thing to become a better navigator, well, then a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you ask yourself the same question, you're going to get the same answer. So I just wanted to challenge you today. How well are you navigating through life? The doing something different is the whole purpose of living the more intentional life. I've been navigating this thing kind of on autopilot and not really knowing what I've been doing. And so if you know nothing about navigation, you're not going to navigate well. But living the more intentional life is learning the skills of life, learning the habits of life, learning how to deal with other people in the good and the bad. Becoming the best possible version of yourself will help you become the best possible navigator for your life. And so we can just dig in further. And if we realize, oh, you know what, it's always these specific storms that get me off track, well, then what do I need to learn about that specific situation or circumstance in life that always throws me off? I can get better at that to become a better navigator. It's just all part of living the more intentional life. But it was just a thought that I had that it helped me, and I'm hoping that'll help you too. If you want to learn more about living this more intentional life, becoming a better navigator through life, you can check out this playlist down here. Until I see you again, go out and live that more intentional life.